Do you think you have a good idea for something? Like, what's really the worst that can happen? I was just starting up. I had no freedom. There's no way to organically grow an Instagram or Twitter meme page anymore.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Season 2 of the Outliers podcast. You're watching part 2 of Zach's episode. In this episode, Liv, Zach, and I talk about the main pros and cons of entrepreneurship based on his own story. So there's a lot of storytelling involved, and I really encourage you guys to see it from his perspective, because that's where all the learning is going to come from. I also want to quickly apologize to our YouTube viewers because there is no video for this episode and the next one, because at the time our Wi-Fi was not very good. The two things I found most interesting about what Zach said was, number one, Zach's perspective on risk, because as he said in his interview, he kind of just goes along with what happens and he thinks about it later. That may be a fairly controversial way of thinking about things, but keep in mind, it has aided him in becoming a successful entrepreneur. Another thing I found really cool about Zach is the way he meets people online using Instagram. Imagine just messaging someone months before you're about to go on your trip, and then when their trip comes, you actually meet them and become friends with them in person. I just think that's a really cool concept. Anyway, that's enough talking for me. I hope you guys enjoy this episode.
What are the biggest pros of your job?
When I was just starting up, I had no freedom, but I think it was a good sacrifice, a few years of hard work, and now, like I said, I only work a few hours a month, and I can travel and not really have to worry about much anymore these days. So that's the main one that comes to mind. I don't know for a second one.
Would you say that getting to meet a lot of the people on your travels would also be a big kind of pro?
Yeah, I think it's really fun meeting people while traveling. I find people are so nice to you, like when you meet them in their country. Because I go to a lot of just random countries that don't get a lot of tourists normally. So it's pretty fun. Like that's my favorite things. I go into places like that and talking to the people there. They're always just like, whoa, like what are you doing here? Like, and then they're always so hospitable, which is really nice. So on the surface, it sounds like really great. I'm 23. I can just travel wherever I want and do whatever. But at the end of the day, sometimes it sucks because I'm not able to go travel with my friends because they have work or they have a job or they don't have any money and so they can't afford it. But yeah, sometimes it's like, oh man, I wish this guy could come with me here because I know he really wants to, but then he can't because he's busy. That's one thing that's a little unfortunate.
What have been your favorite experiences traveling so far?
I don't know if I can pinpoint one really fun experience. I went to Lebanon recently. I was there for 6 weeks. I just was visiting a friend that had been living there, and conveniently they didn't have any COVID restrictions on entering the country, so I was like, why not? I'll go check it out. And yeah, it was a really fun experience. I'd never been to the Middle East before. I met a lot of people, a lot of fun photographers and videographers, and just had a great 6 weeks of traveling all over Lebanon and just doing a bunch of fun stuff. So that was a really, really fun trip for me.
You want to know some of the hardest parts of your job?
So I would say it's not worth it anymore, mostly because it's super, super saturated. There's a lot of people that want to build a big Instagram account and make money from it because it's really caught on in popularity. I think a lot of people know about this as a way to make money now. So secondly, it's not possible with the way these big social media companies are acting anymore. They don't want people to have that big of an influence on their platform, right? Because it directly takes away from the revenue that Instagram would be getting from selling their own ads, right? So Twitter, for example, has suspended a lot of accounts like these, for good reason. And then on Instagram, they kind of just throttle everybody's reach, right? So you might have a lot of followers, but you can be shadow banned and you're not really going to be seen to most of your audience. On Facebook, if you have 1 million followers and you post something, only a really small portion of your audience actually sees it, and you actually have to pay via Facebook ads to target your own audience for your own posts. So I just don't think it's really a feasible business anymore if you're not already really well connected in the space, just because there's so many people and so many barriers to entries at this point.
Right. No, and that totally makes sense.
It's a lot harder these days. If you don't have connections in the industry, it's next to impossible, I would say. Like there's no way to organically grow an Instagram or Twitter meme page anymore. If you want to grow an Instagram page, you literally have to pay for advertising. There's no way around it. You can't just start posting good content that you think people are going to enjoy and use hashtags. It's way too saturated and it's not worth it. Just the amount that people are charging for these things is just absolutely ridiculous.
Can you speak a bit more about taking risks and what advice do you have for people listening about their fear of taking risks?
For me, I don't care about risks personally. Like I just kind of do things and hope that they work out. And most of the time they do. A lot of the times they don't. I think if you're afraid to take risks, like, and you don't try something, like, then you're just gonna fail regardless. I think it's foolish. Like if you have a good idea, or if you think you have a good idea for something, like what's really the worst you can happen, especially when you're young. Like I look back, like when I was in high school and I was just working on my Twitter business, and I wasn't really making any money, but I wasn't going to high school. So that was like, in hindsight, that was a huge risk, right? Like I got terrible grades and barely graduated high school. And my goal at the time was like, oh, imagine if I could make like $1,000 a month so I could rent out my parents' basement suite. Like that was my goal at that time. But that's kind of just my personality, where I kind of do things and then I think about the consequences later. But like obviously in hindsight, if I would have failed and my business wouldn't have taken off, then or even if I had succeeded and I made $1,000 a month to rent my parents' basement suite, that's not really a great goal to have. But that's kind of just always been my personality, is like, if you want to do something, just do it and think about the consequences later. I don't know if that's good advice, but that's kind of how I approach it.
Do you think that there's anything that you did that minimized your like risk factor at all, or your at least?
I'd say like definitely not. I mean, like really, it was like a risky decision to just kind of like go all in on building meme accounts on Twitter, right? I definitely got lucky, but I think me having kind of like a business mindset, I've always kind of wanted to find ways, to make money. And then I started making $1,000 a month and be like, oh, I could definitely make more. I think like having that mentality of wanting to just keep bettering myself and making more money or achieving my goals or whatever, I think that really helped me out. But in terms of minimizing risks, I don't think there's anything like special that I did. I think in any business, like there's going to be a risk. Like that's what you're getting paid for, essentially, is taking the risk, right? You're obviously providing a service, but if there's no risk, then everybody would do it. So
did you ever have a moment where you took a big chance and it didn't work in your favor?
At the end of 2016, beginning of 2017, I told you all of our Twitter accounts got suspended. So during 2016, I spent tons of money just buying any Twitter account, any Twitter account with over 10,000 followers. I would buy it. Somebody would tell me a price, I would just pay it. Like I didn't even care. I would just buy it all. And then I had two competitors to my like management business that they were driving prices down, trying to take my clients away. So I just bought both of them out. And then like 3 months later, Twitter suspended the majority of our accounts and pretty much making all my investments in the Twitter accounts worthless. And then the investment in the management companies equally worthless. So that definitely didn't pan out, but that's the risks you take, I guess.
For sure, right? Like you said, having the bigger companies have so much control over what you do.
Yeah, 100%.
Can you talk about the stress you had at the beginning of your career and maybe the stress you have now with traveling?
Sure. I think at the beginning, like when I was setting it up, my stress was mostly around school. It was like, oh my God, like I have this freaking English essay that I didn't read the book or whatever. Like that school stress, like I still have like this one freaking dream, like a nightmare, man. And then kind of like moving on, like when my business started like ramping up, I think my main stress was like clients, like people being rude or having to deal with people. Because like the thing with this business is it was a 24/7 business. After a certain point, we were running accounts 24/7, like every single day, every single hour, right? So if a client texted me and said, hey, like I need something done, that was like we did it. Like that was like that's what we offered. Like that's how we differentiated ourselves. Like we were always available no matter the time of the day. So I would always have my phone like loud in case somebody called me at like 4 a.m, 7 a.m. Eastern time, telling me to do something, and I'd get up and I'd do it. Or like every night I had to set up like different ads for the next day at like midnight. So like it didn't matter what I was doing that night. At some point between the hours of like 12 and 4 a.m. I had to, set up these ads, which took an hour, which was always stressful because my friends would want to go out and I'd be like, well, I have to do this. So yeah, mostly clients. And then for the traveling, I don't find it that stressful. I think like you definitely can get stressed out while traveling, but at the end of the day, like I don't really have like an agenda. I don't have like a schedule where it's like, okay, I need to be here next week, otherwise I miss a flight or whatever. Like, so like if there's ever, a problem where like I miss a bus and the next one doesn't leave till the next day, like I just get a hotel and I stay there. I figure like worst case scenario, I pay some taxi driver $200 to drive me to a big city and I'll be fine.
This is a quick one, but is it lonely traveling alone?
No, it depends where I am. I can't really think of a time that I've been like lonely, but like I think like for me, like I always meet people like on Instagram. I find that's like a really great place to meet people. So like if I'm like in Turkey, for example, I found there's this one like Algerian photographer. Like he didn't have a lot of followers or anything, but he had followed me on Instagram like a year ago. And whenever somebody follows me from like Algeria, a place that I don't have a lot of followers from, and especially if they're a photographer, like I always follow them back just in case I'm ever in Algeria and I can message them and they'll show me around and I can hang out with them. And so he was in Turkey and he had just spent like 6 months traveling around, and I got in on his last day there, so I hung out with him and he introduced me to his friends and his friends introduced me to their friends. So I met a bunch of people that way. And then like I was planning a trip to Bulgaria and I just reach out to people on Instagram that are photographers, and just be like, hey, like we should go take some photos someday. I'm gonna be in Bulgaria. And so mostly just like I've always been pretty good at like meeting people online. Like a lot of my friends are like a lot of my best friends I met online. So I've never really had a problem with that. And then with Instagram, it's so easy to meet people, which is awesome.
Thanks for listening, everyone. I hope you guys learned something in today's episode, because that is the ultimate purpose of this podcast. If you guys have 1 minute, we'd appreciate it so much if you logged onto your Instagram or messaged me individually and tell us what we can do to improve this podcast, because it helps a lot whether you guys know it or not. You can find my account at Aria Tabitha on Instagram, or you can message us at Outliers Career Podcast. Anyway, that's enough talking for me. I hope to see you guys in the next episode.